For more than a decade, they built a life rooted in faith and family.
She was a smart woman. She loved her kids. She was family-oriented.
He was so charismatic.
He also was a man of faith.
Well, God said we got to clean your filthy.
But in a split second, their future was torn away in an act of violence.
I need somebody here, please. I need somebody here. Oh, Jesus.
It was unbelievable what happened.
It seemed not even like a nightmare. It wasn't real.
Imagine having two fully involved relationships for 10 years.
Double life. That's a double life.
Did betrayal lead to a desperate plot?
She wanted him all to herself.
Or was there a hidden serpent lurking in the garden?
The story starts to unravel.
When everything is said and done, people always know the truth.
Everything was a lie from the very beginning.
Just to see that many people being manipulated at one time, it's just evil.
June 2015. It's a balmy summer in Macon, a mid-sized city located 85 miles south of Atlanta and known as the heart of Georgia.
It's very affordable, a great place to raise a family.
It's not too country, it's not too city. I think it's the perfect blend.
But just after midnight on June 12th, the quiet city is jolted by an urgent call to the Bibb County Sheriff's Office from local pastor William Pounds.
We'll see the emergency.
Ma'am, my girlfriend, she shot herself in the head. I need an ambulance, please. I need somebody here.
Yes, sir. I can get him en route for you, okay? But I need you to try to calm down for me.
Oh, Jesus.
On the 911 call, William is panicking and Kendra is in dire need of medical attention.
She's not breathing.
Okay. She's
not breathing. I'm gonna try to do CPR on her.
Okay. All right. 1, 2, 3, 4,
2,
4,
3,
1,
4,
2,
5,
3,
6,
4,
7,
1,
8,
2,
9,
3.
As William fights to keep Kendra alive, first responders race to the scene. Every second is critical.
As the minutes tick by, Kendra's chances of survival grow dimmer.
For as long as anyone could remember, 46-year-old Kendra Jackson had been a beacon of light in her community.
Kendra was a sweetheart. When she showed up, she brought the sun with her.
People loved her. They say that she was a good mix of sassy and classy.
When you say classy, you say Kendra. You just knew she was gonna look her best, speak her best, present her best at all times.
The daughter of a reverend, Kendra was raised in a devoutly religious household alongside her 3 siblings.
Growing up in a Christian home, especially when your parents are involved in preaching, it can have a big influence on you, and there's a lot of pressure to always do your best.
That kind of defined her trajectory in life.
And nothing in Kendra's life was more important to her than motherhood.
Kendra got married at a young age. Her and her husband had 3 kids.
But the relationship between Ms. Jackson and her husband was not as strong as they had hoped, and they ended up growing apart and divorced.
In the years following the divorce, Kendra worked hard to give her children a good upbringing.
Okay, great. She was very loving towards her kids. Her kids were the priority.
I'll take care of that for you.
She was able to eventually find a good job as a personal banker. She had a part-time job working in a jewelry store.
I'm like, girl, why are you working 2 jobs? Because she was trying to take care of people.
You're a little busy, girl.
If anyone could handle the stress of motherhood and work, it was Kendra.
Taken care of.
We call her Michelle Obama. Like if she was having a bad day, she would have the classiest bad day ever. She was always in mama mode and let me make it better for you mode.
Kendra was the total package. So it seemed only a matter of time before a new suitor came knocking.
She's maintained her faith that God will provide her a good man.
Can I help you?
Yes, I have some questions about my bank account there.
Okay, let me take a look.
William Pounds was a prominent preacher, and he was also a senior master sergeant in the Air Force.
If he was to walk in, he would immediately grab your attention. He's a good-looking man. He was always well-dressed, well-mannered.
The two of them quickly hit it off.
I hate to be forward, but you mind joining me for dinner on Friday?
I'd like that.
He had, a great resume. He also was a man of faith, which immediately resonated with Kendra.
Within a short period of time, Kendra was smitten, and then when she saw him preach, her love grew even bigger.
But God said we got to clean your filth. You still got some dirt on your nails. But even though you have dirt on your nails, he died. Yeah, before you got your engine running like new, he died.
He was so charismatic.
His congregation loved and adored him.
He was able to breathe his own passion into the Word of God, and Kendra found that absolutely inspiring.
To Kendra, it felt like William could be the one, but she had no intention of racing to the altar.
Kendra's first marriage failed, and she was cautious about running into this one, so her and William took it slow.
This is a new person that you're introducing into your world, your children's world.
They dated more than 12 years.
I think game night went well with the kids.
It did. We should do it again sometime.
He was safe for her, and he was her nice guy. And he created that story for her.
In 2012, William finally popped the question.
Well, I was thinking about doing this somewhere a bit more romantic, but Kendra Jackson, will you marry me?
Yes.
In that moment, she was like, okay, this is the one. This is the man that God sent to me.
Kendra thought all of her dreams were coming true.
But now, a few short years later, the couple's future has been hurled into doubt.
Instead of walking down the aisle, Kendra is barely clinging to life.
William was on the phone with 911 and told investigators that she shot herself in the head.
Damn it, Kendra, why you want to do this to me?
When first responders arrive on the scene, William leads them to the bedroom.
She's over here.
They find her collapsed on the floor in a pool of her own blood.
The first responders immediately jump into action.
The paramedics tried to apply first aid.
Every attempt was made to resuscitate her, but eventually it was clear that it was too late.
Kendra was dead.
For more than a decade, Macon pastor William Pounds had been Kendra Jackson's rock.
William was her handsome knight in shining armor. He was charismatic. He said all the right things.
She was planning a wedding to, a man that she loved.
Until a bullet to the head severed their bond forever.
The paramedics tried to apply first aid, but it became too late.
Kendra was dead.
When investigators from the Bibb County Sheriff's Office arrive on the scene, they step aside with Kendra's grieving fiancé.
Sir, I'm sorry for your loss. Do you think you're up to walking us through what happened?
Yeah, I can do that.
Mr. Powell said it started off as a normal day. Him and Kendra and the kids had spent quality time together.
They all had dinner together. And then Kendra drove the kids over to their father's house.
Hurry back.
Kendra returned to the home around 10 p.m.
She came back. Him and her got into bed.
They are watching a basketball game and starting to discuss some of the details of their relationship.
Kendra started pressing him on a date for their marriage.
You know, we've been engaged for a while now. I think it's time that we should start planning the wedding.
She wants her wedding because the whole world around her and William's relationship expects this to happen. Because that is the Christian thing to do.
He told her that he wasn't ready to get married, and she didn't respond well to that.
What do you mean you're not ready? We've been together for like 15 years.
He really loved Kendra, but after so many years, he had felt the relationship had run its course.
William tells investigators that when he broached the subject of ending their relationship, Kendra started to spiral.
All the years that she has invested in their relationship, she feels like she had wasted her time.
Kendra, calm down. We can talk.
Don't tell me to calm down!
He says that she flew into a rage.
Kendra grabbed the handgun off the dresser drawer.
And he thought that she would shoot him.
But instead, Kendra turned the gun on herself.
William told investigators that she shot herself in the left side of the head.
Oh my God!
He goes, attempts to resuscitate, he attempts to do whatever he can.
William said he hurried up and rushed to her side to control the bleeding as he dialed 911.
2, 3, 4.
To the detectives, William looks like a broken man.
He just explained he witnessed his fiance committing suicide, and that's not an easy thing to cope with.
Thank you.
With any death like this, they have to perform an investigation. But in the case of suicide, it's typically just a formality.
The crime scene has the appearance of a suicide. The victim is lying on the floor with a gun in close proximity. The blood is in the appropriate area. The gunshot appears to match up with the scenario provided by Mr. Pounds.
They did find an entry on the wall from the gunshot wound to her head.
But then investigators discover something else that piques their interest. A second bullet hole.
Looks like another bullet hole into the bed.
Sure does.
So this strikes investigators as odd because based on Williams' recitation of events, she only fired one bullet.
However, detectives know that a traumatic event can play tricks on a witness's mind.
When you have so much adrenaline and stuff rushing through your body, sometimes you can't account for what really happened during that time.
We might have what we call auditory exclusion, which really lessens a person's ability to hear in chaotic situations.
Also, with many suicide attempts, some may fire a practice shot before they work up the courage to turn the gun on themselves.
Having completed their preliminary examination, detectives hand the scene over to their forensic team.
Now, Bibb County investigators have to face the difficult decision of notifying Kendra's loved ones.
Kendra's teenage daughters are with their father.
Kendra took her life.
The children, her ex-husband, are all shocked that Kendra had taken her own life.
Suicide? Are you sure?
It was disbelief, because there was no prior indication that Kendra would be susceptible to committing suicide.
There has to be another explanation.
Our mom would never hurt herself.
The family did not believe that suicide was the cause of her death.
They're convinced there has to be more to this story.
Something's not right with it. And your gut is always right.
Detectives in Macon, Georgia have learned that moments before Kendra Jackson allegedly committed suicide, her fiancé, William Pounds, called off their engagement.
He was starting to have some second thoughts about the future of them as a couple.
William said that she grabbed his .40 caliber pistol,
Kendra!
shot herself in the head.
But now Kendra's loved ones are telling the investigators they find that story hard to believe.
There's no way our mom killed herself.
They didn't believe that she would take her own life.
The family was adamant because it was outside of her character and also her faith.
What about warning signs? Did your mom seem depressed lately?
No, not at all.
Amen.
Kendra's daughters tell investigators they spent the previous day with their mother and William.
They said they didn't feel anything out of the ordinary.
And there was even cause to celebrate because Kendra's youngest daughter had just landed a new job.
They had dinner together to celebrate, and then she dropped them off to their father's house to spend the night.
Kendra made plans the next day to spend time with her daughter and go shopping. It just didn't line up.
Kendra's daughters also echo what William said in his statement. The couple wasn't in agreement about their impending wedding.
He just kept pushing back the wedding.
William and Kendra got engaged in 2012. They initially had planned on getting married in 2014. And when the date came around, William encouraged the couple to push it back even further.
Mr. Pound's explanation for the delay was financial issues.
The couple bickered about it. They had, small discussions. Nothing ever rose to the level of thinking that Kendra would take her life behind it.
By the end of the interview, investigators consider that Kendra Jackson's death may not be an open and shut case.
The fact that her loved ones, the people closest to Kendra, were so adamant that this could not be, that leads investigators to reassess the facts.
Could there be more to the story?
When detectives receive the results of Kendra's autopsy, even more questions rise to the surface.
Mr. Pounds told detectives that Kendra shot herself in the left side of the head. Well, the autopsy clearly disputed that. The evidence showed that she had shot herself in the right side.
Of course, adrenaline was running high. So maybe that was an explanation.
However, like the earlier finding that not one, but 2 bullets were fired inside the couple's bedroom, it's another inconsistency in William's version of events.
Had the chaos played tricks on William's memory, or is the story not adding up?
Police ask William to come into the station for a follow-up interview.
Appreciate you coming in on short notice.
Of course. Anything I can do to help.
William was cooperative and he seemed willing to assist in the investigation.
The night Kendra shot herself. Tell me again what you saw.
He tells them again about their argument and how she got up and grabbed the gun from their dresser drawer.
She got up.
William just concretely says she shot herself on the left side of her head. Now, the investigators know from coroner evidence that that is not true.
At that point, Mr. Pound's story starts to unravel.
Your version of events doesn't line up with the evidence. There were 2 shots fired in that bedroom.
Well, I only remember 1 shot.
Did you alter the scene in any way?
No.
That's when investigators asked William a point-blank question.
Did you shoot Kendra? Absolutely not.
Despite the inconsistencies in his story, William maintains that Kendra's death was a suicide. But before investigators end the interview, he drops a bombshell.
He tells police officers that he was in another relationship.
because I'm engaged.
He was engaged to someone else, as well as Kendra.
During an interview with police in Macon, Georgia, William Pounds has just made a stunning confession. The 47-year-old pastor tells detectives he called off his wedding with Kendra Jackson because he was engaged to another woman.
This information comes as a huge surprise to investigators.
Who's gonna believe that a pastor is engaged to two women? You know, not even believe. Who's gonna even suspect?
According to William, the other woman in his life is a police officer who lives 45 minutes away in Atlanta.
What's her name?
Sierra Brinkley.
It's a discovery that forces the investigators to rethink everything they thought they knew. Could Sierra Brinkley be involved in Kendra's death?
Maybe she wanted William all to, herself.
The fact that she was a police officer, she had access to a weapon that might help her facilitate this type of crime.
Sierra agrees to drive down from Atlanta to meet detectives at the Macon Police Department for an interview.
She confirms that yes, she and William, they are engaged.
She reveals to detectives that they had actually been together for over 10 years.
You said 10 years?
That's right.
I mean, that was like wow.
Double life. That's my first thoughts. That's a double life.
Imagine having two fully involved relationships happening an hour away from each other for 10 years. The level of coordination, the level of secrecy that you must maintain.
You're trying to satisfy two people. You're trying to take care of two homes.
As an investigator, when it comes to Sierra, we want to look, when did she become aware that Kendra existed? Where was she at the time this incident happened?
According to Sierra, Kendra's existence was no secret.
What William had told Sierra is that Kendra was an ex, that they had been broken up, separated for years.
I thought that was the truth up until a few weeks ago.
One day, Sierra decided to drive down to Macon and surprise William at his house.
When Sierra popped up at William's house unannounced, Kendra's there.
Sierra asked her, what are you doing here?
What do you mean, what am I doing here? Who the hell are you?
Kendra held up her finger with a wedding ring on it and said that they was engaged to get married.
So what did you do next?
I confronted William.
Wait, no. Go upstairs. I'll handle this. Go upstairs.
William, what is going on?
Let me explain.
William promises to Sierra that things are over with Kendra.
Look, she just came over to pick up some stuff. Our relationship, it's over. Come on. Don't give me that look. You're my only girl and my soon-to-be wife. Okay?
He says they can start preparing for their marriage by going to premarital counseling, hopefully to resolve some of the issues around honesty and fidelity.
And you agreed to go to counseling?
Yes, I did.
They were due to be married on June 12th, and that was the exact same day that Kendra died.
But as investigators know, instead of walking down the aisle with Sierra, William spent that evening with Kendra.
When she found out that William hadn't ended things with Kendra, Sierra could have flown into a jealous rage.
Did you do it and now William is covering up for you?
When investigators pose that question to Sierra, she immediately denies any involvement in Kendra's death.
Of course, Sierra says no. The last time she was even at William's house was on June 5th, a full week before the incident happened.
As police work on verifying Sierra's statement, detectives receive the completed report from the CSI technicians who processed William's home. And their findings are eye-opening.
When detectives had initially walked through the crime scene, they noticed a bullet hole in the wall, but despite exhaustive searching, the CSI was not able to recover the bullet.
What happened to that bullet that was in there, and why was it pried out of the wall?
The forensic team also failed to recover the second bullet that went through the mattress, or either shell casings.
A closer examination of the comforter and mattress revealed more alarming evidence.
They could tell by the way that the bullet had passed through the comforter that the comforter had been moved after the shots were fired. The bed had apparently been remade in an effort to conceal the bullet hole in the mattress and the comforter and the sheets.
Somebody had tampered with the scene.
The trajectory of the bullet that killed Kendra raises an even bigger red flag.
There was no way that Kendra was standing when she allegedly shot herself in the head. The evidence points to her being on the ground.
Based on these new findings, investigators feel confident that Kendra was murdered.
These are no longer discrepancies that you can attribute to faulty memory. So police believe that William has been lying. He's trying to protect himself or his other woman.
When investigators listen to the 911 call William made on the night of Kendra's death, they make yet another chilling discovery.
You still there with me? Sir?
Yes, ma'am. I'm here.
They noticed that Mr. Pounds muted his end of the call 3 to 4 times.
Hey, partner?
Why would a person in the process of administering first aid, CPR, mute his call?
1, 2, 3. You still there with me? Sir?
Yes, ma'am.
Wait, you hear that?
Play that back.
Sir?
Yes, ma'am.
When he unmuted the phone call, you can hear the toilet flushing in the background.
If you are doing CPR, then how are we hearing the flush? What's really going on?
As Macon investigators listen to the 911 call local pastor William Pounds made on the night he alleges his fiancée Kendra Jackson committed suicide, they notice a curious noise in the background.
You still there with me? Sir?
Yes, ma'am.
You can hear the toilet flushing in the background.
They suspected that toilet flushing noise could actually be William flushing down the bullet and the shell casings.
When detectives follow up with the paramedics who responded that night, they poke even more holes in William's story.
William told 911 operators that he performed CPR on Kendra before first responders arrived. But first responders, they said there was no sign of blood on William's clothes, except for a couple tiny specks on his pants.
With the amount of blood on the scene, his hands and his lower shirt should have been covered in blood.
The first responders go on to say that William told them something else in those first frantic minutes.
Their story they got from Mr. Pounds was different than the story that Mr. Pounds told the detective.
He said that he was downstairs, and then he heard the gunshot go off upstairs, and then that's when he ran upstairs.
William told them that he had to kick the door in order to get to Kendra. There was no evidence that the door had been kicked in at all.
As red flags pile up, detectives also start to hear from Kendra's closest confidants. They all agree that her decade-plus relationship with William was nothing short of a roller coaster.
Kendra's friends explained to investigators that William was not this perfect fiancé, perfect man.
William was a liar, he was a manipulator.
He knew he was good looking and he had the gift of gab. I think he felt as though that was a calling card for him to get into any door he wanted to.
She had caught him cheating on multiple occasions.
Who is this?
Kendra.
Who is she?
Phone.
Who is this?
Stop.
What are you doing?
I'm sorry, okay? You know how much I love you. It won't happen again.
To their dismay, friends say Kendra stayed with William despite his philandering behavior.
Even when she knew it was broken, she loved enough to be able, I can put it back together, I can fix it. She really believed that.
Jesus reminds us to forgive.
It's almost like, you know, when somebody's in a Ponzi scam and they keep putting their money into it. And you don't want to tell them not to, but you kind of want to take their checking account. But she kept depositing and he kept taking.
She's already experienced divorce. So maybe Kendra was thinking, I don't want to start over.
Friends say the couple's engagement offered Kendra a fleeting moment of happiness.
She was proud of her ring, but I think that's all she had, was that ring. It was a shallow happiness.
They would discuss a wedding date, and he would move it or come up with some type of excuse.
Anything that he said was a lie. All of it was a lie. And every day it was killing her. Every day it was taking more of Kendra from Kendra. And she loved so hard that she put blinders on and couldn't even see that she was being stripped from herself.
However, in the past month, friends say Kendra had stopped wearing her engagement ring.
After Kendra found out about Sierra, that felt like the last straw.
Now, not only have you been played by a fool, but you've been playing the fool.
Kendra was done at this point.
In the course of their interviews, detectives learned that William's affair with Sierra Brinkley wasn't the only one.
The investigation reveals that William had been seeing about 5 separate women.
He was stringing them all along, telling each of them that they were the love of his life.
It was disgusting.
When authorities received Sierra Brinkley's phone records, William's last defense finally crumbles.
She was in Atlanta. She was nowhere near Macon when this took place.
She was not at the scene of the crime when it happened.
On August 21st, 2015, Bibb County Sheriff's investigators charged William Pounds with malice murder, felony murder, and aggravated assault.
William was arrested for Kendra's murder, and he was calm and maintained his innocence.
The family finally has this moment where they can breathe and they have a sense of relief.
But that feeling of relief doesn't last long.
His bond was $500,000. That's a lot. But he reached out to his congregation.
On September 15th, at William's bond hearing, his congregation shows up and rallies around him.
Pastors in the faith community are revered because they are delivering the word of God every week. People truly believe they are instruments of the divine. And so the initial reaction for a lot of people is denial.
They was like, no, he didn't do this. And they went ahead and bonded him out.
Within weeks of his arrest, William is back on the street as a free man.
For Kendra's loved ones, it's an ominous sign of things to come.
It just goes to show just how powerful he is. He feels invincible.
It's almost like he's gotten away with it. He was so charismatic. He tricked them, too.
If I never had a problem, if I never had conflict.
He is the instrument of God. They can't let God go to jail.
Then I wouldn't know how to go to the manufacturer.
By the fall of 2015, Macon police have charged Kendra Jackson's fiance, William Pounds, with killing her and staging it as a suicide.
William is a respected, beloved pastor, so the congregation is quick to rally money to get him released.
They felt like he was wrongfully accused.
They paid his bond and allowed him to get back out on the street.
Backed by a devoted flock of believers, prosecutors feel that William's conviction is no sure thing.
It can be hard to overcome a defendant's image, especially when someone is seen upright and moral.
In the eyes of the public, William Pounds is a pillar in his community. And so it's gonna be difficult to convince a jury that he's actually a liar, cheater, and a murderer.
But as the trial date approaches, prosecutors receive a helping hand from an unexpected source: William himself.
As a condition of his bond, Mr. Pounds had to wear an ankle monitor so his whereabouts could be monitored. He had restrictions.
He's approved to go to places that, a normal person would need to go. The doctor's office, the grocery store, his home.
However, the powerful pastor has no intention of following the rules.
He was breaking his bond conditions. He was drinking, he was going out to parties like nothing never happened.
Kendra was gone, this sweetheart. These two daughters now don't have a mother. So many people affected. And the nerve of him to celebrate anything ever again in life.
He was clearly violating the conditions of his bond, and he was rearrested.
This is when the congregation started to realize that this is not the church-going man that they all thought he was.
Just to see that many people being manipulated at one time, it's just evil. I felt bad for the people.
When William's trial begins in October 2017, he still remains confident that his pious image will carry him through to a not guilty verdict.
William enters the courtroom with a Bible in his hand.
He's still keeping up with this persona that he's created.
But prosecutors aren't having it.
They contend that William's mountain of lies can prove that he's the killer.
Prosecutors tell the jury that on the night of June 12, 2015, William and Kendra got into an argument.
I noticed you ain't been wearing that ring I gave you.
You damn right I haven't.
Based on the statements from her friends, prosecutors believe that Kendra was done with William.
Why would I wear the ring of a man who's engaged to another woman?
As simmering resentments bubbled to the surface, the couple's argument intensified.
Prosecutors believe that Kendra, having seen William's web of lies firsthand, was going to expose him for a fraud, a liar, a manipulator.
That's right. I'm gonna tell the entire congregation that their pastor is a damn hypocrite.
You know what?
And so instead of taking responsibility for his actions, investigators say that he opted to silence her altogether.
What are you gonna tell now?
What are you doing?
What are you gonna tell now?
What are you doing?
You're not doing anything. Where are you going?
William took his military-issued pistol and fired 2 shots. One that went through the bed and another that went through Kendra's head.
Once Kendra was dead, Mr. Pounds immediately tried to stage the scene so it appeared that Kendra had committed suicide. Mr. Pounds retrieved the bullet from the wall, retrieved the casing from the floor. He took both items into the bathroom and flushed them down the toilet.
Once the jury retires to deliberate, it doesn't take them long to return with their verdict.
William Pounds was found guilty of malice murder, felony murder, and aggravated assault.
William was sentenced to life without the possibility of parole.
It's a victory for the dedicated investigators who worked tirelessly to bring William to justice. But for Kendra's loved ones, the conviction falls short of healing their wounds.
I don't think there's any amount of time that he could do to repair the pain and the hurt and the brokenness. That doesn't bring Kendra back.
It takes a unique kind.
February 2nd, 2008. On the surface, it looked like the beginning of an ordinary Saturday evening. The streets of Greater Victoria, British Columbia, were settling into the quiet rhythm of a winter weekend. Cars rolled through suburban neighborhoods. Porch lights flickered on one by one as daylight faded into the cold blue darkness of early February. Families gathered around dinner tables. Televisions glowed behind curtains. Somewhere, people were laughing over drinks, making plans for the night ahead. Nothing about that evening suggested that one of Canada's most haunting murder mysteries was only minutes away from unfolding. And yet, hidden behind the front door of a vacant luxury home in the quiet suburb of Saanich, a trap had already been set. A trap so carefully designed that nearly 2 decades later, investigators still cannot explain exactly who built it. Or why. The house stood silent on a newly developed street. Fresh paint. Clean windows. Empty rooms waiting for future owners. No family photographs. No personal belongings. No signs of life. Just cold walls and hollow spaces. The kind of place where voices echo. The kind of place where footsteps sound louder than they should. The kind of place where nobody would hear a scream. At approximately 5:30 p.m., a young real estate agent arrived at the property. She was 24 years old. Ambitious. Energetic. Hard-working. The kind of person who was building a future rather than looking back at the past. Her name was Lindsay Buziak. She had shown homes before. Hundreds of them. Meeting strangers was part of the job. Opening doors for people she had never met was part of the job. Trusting potential buyers was part of the job. But this time was different. For days, something had been bothering her. Something she could not fully explain. A feeling. A voice on the telephone. A strange request. A client who seemed too eager. Too specific. Too mysterious. The details had gnawed at her instincts. Enough that she mentioned her concerns to people close to her. Enough that she told them she felt uneasy. Not terrified. Not panicked. Just uncomfortable. As if somewhere deep inside, a warning signal had begun to flicker. Most people experience moments like that. A strange feeling before boarding a flight. A sudden hesitation before entering a building. An unexplained sense that something is wrong. Usually nothing happens. Usually those feelings disappear as quickly as they arrive. But sometimes they don't. Sometimes instinct notices danger before logic catches up. And on that February evening, Lindsay Buziak walked directly toward a meeting that would become one of the most discussed unsolved encounters in Canadian criminal history. The clients had contacted her only days earlier. A wealthy couple, they claimed. Recent arrivals. Interested in purchasing a home worth roughly $1 million. Ready to buy immediately. No hesitation. No endless negotiations. No months of searching. Just a quick purchase. A dream client for almost any realtor. Yet from the beginning, the interaction felt strange. The woman who made the initial contact spoke with what witnesses later described as an unusual accent. Not easily identifiable. Not obviously local. There was something rehearsed about the conversation. Something difficult to define. The kind of detail that sounds insignificant at first. The kind of detail that becomes unforgettable after a murder. Lindsay noticed it. She remembered it. And she told others about it. If someone had asked her at that moment whether she believed she was in danger, she probably would have said no. Because danger rarely announces itself. It doesn't arrive wearing a mask. It doesn't introduce itself as a killer. Instead, it hides behind ordinary moments. A phone call. A meeting. A handshake. A smile. A front door opening. And before anyone realizes what is happening, an ordinary day becomes the dividing line between before and after. As the evening approached, Lindsay prepared for the showing. The property she would be presenting wasn't occupied. Nobody lived there. Nobody would unexpectedly walk through the front door. Nobody would interrupt the meeting. The house sat alone. Waiting. Looking perfectly harmless beneath the fading winter sky. What nobody knew then was that investigators would later examine nearly every detail of that location. Why that house? Why that neighborhood? Why that exact time? Why Lindsay? Every answer seemed to create 2 more questions. And every question deepened the mystery. Meanwhile, another person was waiting nearby. Jason Zylo. Lindsay's boyfriend. He knew she felt uncomfortable about the appointment. Not frightened enough to cancel. But concerned enough that she wanted someone close. Someone nearby. Someone she could call if things felt wrong. So Jason stayed in the area. Watching. Waiting. Believing he was only there as a precaution. Believing that in a few minutes Lindsay would finish the showing, walk back outside, and continue with the rest of her evening. A simple gesture of support. Nothing more. At least, that was the plan. Because plans are built on assumptions. And one assumption would later haunt everyone connected to this case. The assumption that Lindsay was meeting clients. The assumption that a real estate showing was actually a real estate showing. The assumption that the people walking toward that house had come to buy property. Witnesses would later describe seeing a man and a woman approaching the residence. They appeared ordinary. Well-dressed. Calm. Unremarkable. Nothing about them attracted immediate attention. No obvious signs of panic. No visible weapons. No dramatic confrontation. Just 2 people arriving for what looked like a business appointment. The sort of scene that happens thousands of times every day. A realtor meeting prospective buyers. A routine interaction. A normal transaction. The perfect disguise. Because the most effective traps rarely look like traps. They look safe. They look familiar. They look ordinary. The front door opened. Lindsay welcomed them inside. And then the 3 figures disappeared from public view. For a brief moment, everything seemed normal. The quiet suburban street remained peaceful. The neighboring houses stood unchanged. The winter air drifted across empty driveways. No one heard a struggle. No one heard a cry for help. No one saw a murderer. And yet, somewhere inside that empty house, events were already moving toward a violent conclusion. Minutes passed. Then more minutes. The appointment should have been progressing normally. A walk through the rooms. A discussion about square footage. Questions about the property. The kind of conversation that fills real estate showings every day. But this wasn't an ordinary showing. Because whoever arranged that meeting had no intention of buying a house. The property itself may have been nothing more than bait. A carefully selected stage. An isolated location. A place chosen not for its value, but for its emptiness. A place where someone could control the situation. A place where a target could be separated from safety. A place where a killer could disappear. 20 minutes later, concern began to grow. Messages went unanswered. Communication stopped. Something felt wrong. At first, the silence seemed explainable. Perhaps she was busy with clients. Perhaps she hadn't checked her phone. Perhaps the meeting was taking longer than expected. But the feeling persisted. That uncomfortable feeling. The kind that starts small and grows heavier with every passing minute. Eventually, waiting became impossible. The decision was made to check on her. No one could have imagined what was waiting inside. No one could have imagined that a routine real estate appointment had transformed into a homicide scene. No one could have imagined that the mystery about to emerge would survive for years. Then decades. Then an entire generation. When investigators eventually arrived, they found something that immediately changed the nature of the case. This was not a robbery. Nothing appeared stolen. This was not a random attack. The circumstances suggested planning, precision, intent. Whoever committed the murder seemed to know exactly what they were doing. And perhaps even more chilling, they appeared to know exactly who they were targeting. As news of the crime spread, shock quickly turned into confusion. Confusion turned into speculation. Speculation turned into obsession. Because every detail seemed impossible. The mysterious phone call. The wealthy buyers who vanished. The vacant house. The absence of meaningful forensic evidence. The strange timing. The unanswered questions. Each piece fit somewhere within the puzzle. But the complete picture never appeared. Years later, detectives would still revisit the case. Journalists would still analyze it. Podcasters would still debate it. Online communities would still argue over theories. Was it a professional hit? A personal vendetta? A carefully orchestrated deception? Did the killers know Lindsay personally? Or had she unknowingly crossed paths with something far larger than herself? The answers remained hidden. And perhaps that is what makes this story so unsettling. Not simply the violence. Not simply the mystery. But the terrifying possibility that someone planned every detail. That someone selected the victim. Created false identities. Used disposable communication. Lured a young woman into an empty house. Completed their objective. And then stepped back into the world without leaving enough evidence for justice to catch up. Nearly 20 years have passed since that winter evening. The house still exists. The names remain the same. The questions remain the same. And somewhere, perhaps, the truth remains the same as well. Waiting. Hidden behind a single unanswered question. Who wanted Lindsay Busiak dead badly enough to build an entire illusion just to get her alone? Tonight, we begin the search for that answer. Before there was a murder, before there were headlines, theories, suspect sketches, and unanswered questions, there was a city wrapped in ocean air and surrounded by some of the most beautiful landscapes in Canada. Victoria, British Columbia. A place that often appears on travel brochures and postcards. A city known for its gardens, historic buildings, quiet neighborhoods, and slow coastal charm. Tourists arrived searching for beauty. Retirees arrived searching for peace. Families arrived searching for stability. Few people looked at Victoria and imagined violent crime. Even fewer imagined a murder mystery that would eventually capture attention far beyond Canada's borders. In the winter of 2008, Victoria was home to just over 70,000 people, while the surrounding Greater Victoria region supported a much larger population spread across neighboring communities. It was large enough that strangers could pass unnoticed, but small enough that certain names, businesses, and families became familiar throughout local circles. People often described the city as comfortable, predictable, safe. The kind of place where routine became part of daily life. Morning commuters crossed familiar roads. Students attended familiar schools. Business owners greeted familiar customers. Many residents believed serious violence happened somewhere else. In bigger cities. In darker places. Not here. Not in neighborhoods lined with tidy lawns and freshly built homes. Not in communities where children rode bicycles through suburban streets. Not in places where real estate signs stood peacefully beside sidewalks. Yet history has a habit of reminding people that danger does not respect geography. It does not care whether a neighborhood appears wealthy. It does not care whether a city feels safe. Sometimes the most disturbing crimes emerge from places that seem completely ordinary. And in early 2008, one particular area of Greater Victoria represented optimism, growth, and financial success. The suburb of Sannock. Located just outside Victoria's downtown core, Sannock blended residential comfort with expanding development. New homes were appearing across previously undeveloped land. Construction crews worked on growing neighborhoods. Real estate was thriving. The housing market was strong. Property values were climbing. Ambitious young professionals saw opportunity everywhere. Among them were real estate agents competing for clients in a market that seemed full of possibilities. Every showing represented potential income. Every new listing represented a chance to build a reputation. Every successful sale moved someone closer to financial independence. For many young agents, long hours were simply part of the job. Weekend appointments, evening meetings, conversations with strangers, last-minute showings. The profession required trust. That trust became one of the most important and troubling aspects of the Lindsay Busiak case. Because real estate agents regularly meet people they have never encountered before. A phone call comes in. A potential buyer expresses interest. An appointment is arranged. A door opens. The entire business model depends on the assumption that most people are who they claim to be. Most of the time, that assumption proves correct. But not always. And when it fails, the consequences can be devastating. To understand why the events of February 2nd shocked so many people, it is necessary to understand what life felt like in Victoria before the murder. The city was not living under fear. Residents were not locking themselves indoors. There was no widespread panic. No warning sign suggesting a carefully planned homicide was about to occur. The world still felt normal. That normality is important, because it created the perfect environment for someone who wished to remain unnoticed. A killer does not always need darkness. Sometimes a killer benefits from daylight. Sometimes a killer benefits from normal routines. The safest disguise in the world is often appearing ordinary. As winter settled over Vancouver Island, Victoria experienced the cool, damp weather typical of the Pacific Northwest. Rain moved through the region. Clouds drifted across grey skies. The air carried the scent of salt water and wet earth. The season encouraged people to move quickly between destinations. Into cars. Into offices. Into homes. The weather itself seemed uneventful. No dramatic storm. No unusual conditions. Nothing that would later stand out in memory. Yet while most residents focused on their daily lives, someone was quietly preparing for a meeting that would alter the future of an entire family. A meeting hidden beneath the appearance of business. A meeting that would leave investigators struggling to determine where preparation ended and execution began. Years later, detectives would revisit nearly every detail connected to those final days. The neighborhood. The phone calls. The timing. The people involved. The routes taken. The vacant house. Every element seemed deliberate. Every element felt selected. The more investigators examined the crime, the less random it appeared. And that realization transformed the murder from a tragic homicide into something even more unsettling. Because random violence is frightening. Planned violence is terrifying. Random violence creates fear. Planned violence creates questions. Questions about motive. Questions about preparation. Questions about knowledge. Questions about access. Questions about how much the killers knew before they ever stepped inside that house. The location itself would become a central character in the story. The property on De Souza Place sat within a developing residential neighborhood. Large homes. Wide streets. Modern construction. The type of area associated with success and comfort. Visitors driving through the neighborhood would likely notice attractive architecture and quiet surroundings. Nothing about the street suggested that it would become one of the most infamous crime scenes in Canadian history. Yet appearances can be deceptive. A beautiful setting does not guarantee safety. In fact, some investigators later believed the location may have been chosen precisely because it appeared so harmless. A vacant luxury home offered several advantages. Few witnesses inside. Minimal interruptions. Limited unexpected visitors. An environment that felt professional enough for a business appointment. The house itself became more than a location. It became part of the mystery. Why there? Why not another property? Why not a public place? Why not a different realtor? Every answer seemed trapped behind information investigators could not fully access. And while police searched for those answers, another reality emerged. The murder had occurred during a period when technology was evolving rapidly but had not yet reached the level of modern surveillance. Today, many people carry devices that continuously record location data. Security cameras are more common. Digital footprints are harder to erase. Communication records often reveal extensive details about movement and behavior. In 2008, those tools existed in more limited forms. Investigators still relied heavily on witness statements, physical evidence, and traditional detective work. For a criminal determined to remain invisible, the timing may have offered significant advantages. A disposable phone could disappear. A brief encounter could leave minimal digital traces. A carefully planned operation could create enormous challenges for law enforcement. These realities would become increasingly important as the investigation unfolded. But none of that was visible to the public during those final days before the murder. To neighbors, life continued normally. To local businesses, customers came and went. To friends and family members, future plans remained intact. No one knew they were approaching a moment that would divide their lives into before and after. That division is something often overlooked in true crime stories. When people examine a case years later, they focus on evidence. Timelines. Suspects. Theories. But for families, tragedy arrives differently. There is always a final ordinary day. A final ordinary conversation. A final ordinary message. Nobody recognizes those moments when they happen. Only afterward do they become significant. Only afterward do people replay them endlessly in their minds. Searching for clues. Searching for meaning. Searching for warnings that never seemed important at the time. In the days before February 2nd, Victoria existed in that state of unawareness. The city moved forward without realizing that one of its most enduring mysteries was already taking shape. Somewhere, someone had acquired a disposable phone. Somewhere, someone had created a false identity. Somewhere, someone had developed a plan detailed enough to survive years of investigation. Whether the objective was revenge, silence, punishment, intimidation, or something else entirely remains unknown. What is known is that the planning appeared extensive. The illusion appeared convincing. And the target appeared specific. The murder of Lindsay Buziak was not simply shocking because a young woman lost her life. It was shocking because the circumstances felt almost impossible. The setup resembled something from a crime novel. A mysterious client. A vacant house. False names. A disappearing phone. Unknown suspects. No obvious motive. No arrest. No resolution. The pieces seemed too perfect. Too controlled. Too deliberate. As public awareness of the case grew, many residents began viewing familiar places differently. Real estate offices no longer felt quite as routine. Vacant properties no longer seemed entirely harmless. Meetings with strangers carried a different meaning. The crime exposed vulnerabilities that many people had never considered before. It forced questions about trust. About safety. about how easily someone could exploit ordinary professional interactions. For young real estate agents across Canada, the case became a cautionary tale. For investigators, it became a puzzle. For Lindsay's family, it became a nightmare that refused to end. And for the city of Victoria, it became a shadow stretching across years. A reminder that even places celebrated for peace can harbor secrets. As February 2008 continued to fade into history, one truth became impossible to ignore. Whoever orchestrated the meeting had done more than commit murder. They had constructed a mystery. A mystery built from ordinary details. A mystery hidden inside a routine business appointment. A mystery that would survive long after evidence grew cold. And at the center of that mystery stood a young woman whose story had not yet been fully told. Because before Lindsay Buziak became a victim, she was a daughter, a friend, a colleague, a girlfriend, and a young woman filled with plans for the future. To understand why her death still resonates nearly 2 decades later, we must first understand who she was while she was alive. And that story begins long before anyone ever picked up a disposable phone. Long before her name became associated with one of Canada's most baffling unsolved murder cases, Lindsay Buziak was simply a young woman trying to build a life. She was not famous. She was not wealthy. She was not someone who attracted national attention. Like millions of young adults, she was focused on the future. Focused on career opportunities. Focused on relationships. Focused on becoming the person she believed she could be. That is one of the greatest tragedies hidden inside every true crime story. The victim is often remembered for the worst day of their life. Their dreams become footnotes. Their personality becomes secondary to the investigation. Their humanity slowly disappears behind police reports, timelines, and theories. Yet before February 2, 2008, Lindsay's story was not a crime story. It was a story about ambition. About youth. About possibility. Friends and family often described her as energetic and driven. She possessed the kind of confidence that naturally draws people in. Not arrogance. Not attention-seeking behavior. Rather, the confidence of someone who genuinely believed that hard work could create a better future. She had goals. She had plans. She had expectations for the years ahead. People who knew her remembered her smile. They remembered her sense of humor. They remembered someone who enjoyed socializing and building connections. In many ways, those qualities made her well suited for a career in real estate. Success in that profession depends heavily on relationships. Clients need to trust you. Strangers need to feel comfortable around you. Every interaction matters. Every impression counts. Lindsay understood that. She understood the importance of communication. The importance of professionalism. The importance of presenting confidence even when facing uncertainty. At 24 years old, she stood at a point in life where possibilities often seem endless. The future still feels open. Mistakes feel temporary. Challenges feel manageable. Time appears abundant. Many people can remember being 24. Old enough to make independent decisions. Young enough to believe there will always be another opportunity tomorrow. Another year. Another decade. Another chance. No one imagines how quickly that future can disappear. Those who knew Lindsay saw someone actively moving forward. She was building experience within a competitive industry. Building professional contacts. Building a reputation. The real estate market in Victoria offered opportunities for ambitious young agents willing to invest long hours. Success did not happen overnight. Every appointment mattered. Every client mattered. Every referral mattered. A single successful transaction could open doors to future business. Young professionals in industries like real estate often live between pressure and optimism. Pressure because competition is intense. Optimism because every day brings new possibilities. Lindsay appeared comfortable navigating both worlds. She worked hard. She invested energy into her career. She believed in growth. She believed in progress. And like many young people, she was still discovering exactly what kind of future she wanted. Outside of work, she maintained relationships with family and friends who cared deeply about her. These relationships would later become central to understanding the emotional devastation caused by her death. When a person is murdered, investigators often focus on facts. Time of death. Physical evidence. Witness statements. But families experience something very different. Families lose routines. They lose conversations. They lose traditions. They lose birthdays, holidays, and future memories that never have the chance to exist. The death of one person creates hundreds of smaller losses. Losses that continue for years. Sometimes for generations. Lindsay's family would eventually become known not only for their grief but for their determination. Because as the years passed and answers failed to emerge, they refused to allow the case to disappear from public consciousness. But before that fight began, before media interviews and public appeals, there was simply a family who loved a daughter. A family who expected to see her again. A family who believed she was coming home. That expectation is one of the most heartbreaking elements of this story. On the day of the murder, nobody close to Lindsay believed they were approaching a permanent goodbye. Nobody expected a final conversation. Nobody recognized a final hug. Nobody realized that ordinary interactions were becoming memories. Human beings rarely recognize endings while they are happening. Endings only become visible in hindsight. A text message suddenly becomes the last text message. A phone call becomes the last phone call. A smile becomes the last smile. After tragedy strikes, people revisit those moments endlessly. Trying to remember exact words. Trying to remember expressions. Trying to find significance in details that once seemed ordinary. That process would haunt many people connected to Lindsay's life. Especially because her final days contained something unusual. A sense of unease. Not overwhelming fear. Not panic. But concern. The kind of concern that lingers quietly beneath the surface. By all accounts, Lindsay was not someone who frightened easily. Meeting strangers was part of her profession. Showing homes to unfamiliar clients was routine. Trusting people she had never met was often necessary. Yet something about the upcoming appointment bothered her. The details felt strange. The communication felt unusual. The prospective buyers felt difficult to understand. Those concerns became important later because they suggested Lindsay noticed something that others could not see. Perhaps she recognized inconsistencies. Perhaps she sensed deception. Perhaps her instincts detected danger. Or perhaps she simply experienced an ordinary feeling that became significant only after the tragedy. The truth remains uncertain. What is certain is that she spoke about her discomfort. She mentioned it. She shared it. She did not keep it entirely to herself. That detail has fascinated investigators and researchers for years. Because it creates a painful question. If Lindsay sensed something was wrong, how much did she truly know? Did she suspect she was meeting dishonest clients? Did she believe the appointment was merely strange? Or did she sense a level of danger she could not fully explain? No one can answer those questions. Only Lindsay knew exactly what she felt. And whatever answers she possessed disappeared with her. As investigators later reconstructed her final days, they found themselves examining every aspect of her personal and professional life. Who did she know? Who knew her? Who may have held resentment? Who may have benefited from harming her? Who may have had access to information about her schedule? The challenge was enormous because Lindsay appeared, by most accounts, to be living a normal life. She was not known as a dangerous criminal. She was not connected to violent activity. She was not someone expected to become the target of a carefully planned homicide. That fact alone intensified the mystery. Targeted murders usually suggest motive. Motive suggests conflict. Conflict suggests explanation. Yet investigators struggle to identify a clear reason someone would invest so much effort into killing her. The more people learned about Lindsay, the more difficult that question became. Friends described a young woman with goals. Colleagues described someone working to establish herself professionally. Family members described someone deeply loved. None of those descriptions pointed naturally toward murder. And yet murder occurred. Not only murder, but a killing that appeared highly organized. That contradiction remains one of the most troubling aspects of the case. The victim appeared ordinary. The crime appeared extraordinary. Somewhere between those two realities lies the truth. As media coverage expanded, public attention often shifted towards suspects, theories, and speculation. This is common in high-profile investigations. People become fascinated by the unknown. They focus on killers. They focus on motives. They focus on mysteries. But doing so can unintentionally erase the person at the center of the story. Lindsay was more than a victim. She was a human being living a life interrupted without warning. She had favorite places. Favorite memories. Private hopes. Future plans. There were vacations she would never take. Experiences she would never have. People she would never meet. Milestones she would never reach. The future she imagined disappeared inside an empty house occupied by strangers. That reality is easy to overlook when discussing theories and evidence. Yet it remains the most important truth in the entire case. A young woman lost everything. And those who loved her lost her. As years passed, photographs became increasingly significant. Pictures frozen in time. Smiles captured forever. Images representing a life that stopped at 24. Family members continued aging. Friends moved forward. The world changed. Technology evolved. Entire generations grew up. But Lindsay remained permanently 24 years old. A reality shared by victims in countless unsolved cases. Time continues for everyone except the person at the center of the tragedy. For investigators, Lindsay became a case file. For journalists, a story. For the public, a mystery. For her family, she remained a daughter. And that distinction matters. Because behind every theory lies a human absence. An empty chair at family gatherings. A missing voice during holidays. A future that never arrived. As the days leading to February 2nd unfolded, Lindsay likely viewed her life through the same lens as countless other young professionals. Thinking about work. Thinking about relationships. Thinking about tomorrow. She could not know that strangers were allegedly moving closer to her world. She could not know that a phone call would become infamous. She could not know that investigators would someday analyze her final movements minute by minute. She could not know that millions of people would eventually hear her name. She simply believed she was living another chapter of her life. A chapter filled with plans still waiting to be written. What makes the tragedy even more haunting is how ordinary those final days appeared. No dramatic warning. No visible threat. No obvious countdown toward disaster. Just routine life moving forward. Until suddenly it wasn't. And as February 2nd approached, the gap between Lindsay's expectations and reality grew smaller with every passing hour. She believed she was preparing for a business appointment. Someone else may have been preparing for something entirely different. And soon, those two realities would collide inside a vacant house in Sanic, creating a mystery that remains unsolved to this day. Saturday, February 2nd, 2008 began like countless other days. The world did not feel different. The sky above Victoria carried the familiar colors of a Canadian winter afternoon. Clouds drifted slowly across the horizon. The air was cool, damp, and quiet. Traffic moved through the city in steady waves. People went shopping. Families visited friends. Couples made plans for the evening. Nothing in the atmosphere suggested that within a matter of hours, a young woman would walk into one of the most enduring mysteries in modern Canadian criminal history. For Lindsay Buziak, the day was expected to be productive. She had a property showing scheduled later that evening. On paper, it was exactly the type of appointment a real estate agent hopes to receive. Potential buyers. A high-value property. A possible sale. An opportunity. Yet beneath the routine appearance of the appointment, something remained unsettled. The strange phone calls. The unusual client. The feeling she had discussed with people close to her. That quiet discomfort had not completely disappeared. It lingered. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Just enough to remain in the back of her mind. As the afternoon moved toward evening, preparations were made for the showing. The property was located on D'Souza Place in Sanic. An upscale residential area filled with large homes and carefully maintained streets. The house itself was vacant. No family lived there. No children played inside. No furniture softened the empty rooms. No personal belongings occupied the shelves. It was a structure waiting for future owners. A place designed for strangers to walk through and imagine their future. Ironically, it would soon become a place permanently associated with the destruction of one future. As the appointment approached, Lindsay remained committed to her professional responsibilities. Whatever concerns she felt were apparently not severe enough to cancel the meeting. That decision would later be examined repeatedly. People would ask why she went. Why she agreed to meet. Why she entered the house. But those questions are easier to ask after tragedy. At the time, she was a working professional meeting prospective clients. Nothing more. At least, that is how it appeared. As daylight slowly faded, the neighborhood around D'Souza Place settled into the calm rhythm of early evening. Streetlights prepared to take over from the disappearing sun. Residents returned home. Garage doors opened and closed. Dogs barked in distant yards. The ordinary sounds of suburban life continued without interruption. The house waited silently. Its windows reflected the fading sky. Its empty rooms held no indication of what was about to happen. Meanwhile, Lindsay's boyfriend, Jason Zylo, was aware of her concerns regarding the appointment. The uneasy feeling she had described was significant enough that arrangements had been made for him to remain nearby during the showing. Not inside the property. Not standing beside her. Just close enough to provide reassurance. Close enough to be available if needed. The decision itself now feels chilling. It suggests that the situation was unusual enough to warrant caution. Yet not unusual enough to trigger alarm. That middle ground would later become one of the most haunting aspects of the case. Danger existed. But it was hidden. Visible only in fragments. A strange voice. An odd request. An uncomfortable instinct. Not enough to stop the meeting. Enough to create concern. At approximately 5:30 p.m., witnesses observed two individuals approaching the property. A man. A woman. They appeared calm. Well-dressed. Ordinary. There was no visible urgency. No confrontation. Nothing dramatic. The image is unsettling precisely because it seems so normal. Two potential homebuyers arriving for a scheduled viewing. A scene that occurs every day in cities around the world. Yet in hindsight, those footsteps toward the house may have marked the final stage of a carefully prepared operation. Witnesses later described the female visitor as blonde and stylishly dressed. The man appeared tall, dark-haired, and similarly presentable. Neither individual appeared nervous. Neither attracted immediate suspicion. Nothing about them announced violence. Nothing about them suggested murder. The pair approached the residence. Moments later, Lindsay greeted them. The front door opened. The clients entered, and the three figures disappeared from public view. That was the last confirmed moment anyone saw Lindsay alive. Inside the house, events become difficult to reconstruct with certainty. There were no surviving witnesses. No cameras documenting every movement. No complete record of the conversation that took place. The walls of the empty property became the only silent observers. Investigators have spent years attempting to understand what happened during those minutes. What was said? Who moved where? How the situation unfolded? What transformed a property showing into a homicide? The answers remain hidden. Yet certain possibilities emerge from the available evidence. The meeting likely began normally. At least initially. A prospective buyer typically expects a tour. Discussion about the property's features. Questions regarding layout, pricing, and amenities. Perhaps Lindsay began exactly as she would during any other showing. Professional. Friendly. Confident. Explaining rooms. Describing details. Guiding her clients through the home. If so, at what moment did everything change? Did she recognize the deception? Did she realize the visitors had no intention of purchasing the property? Did she understand she had been specifically targeted? Or did violence arrive suddenly, without warning? Those questions remain unanswered. What investigators do know is that the attack was brutal. This was not an accidental death. Not a confrontation that spiraled unexpectedly out of control. The violence suggested determination. Intent. Purpose. Whoever killed Lindsay appeared committed to ensuring she would not survive. That realization altered the entire nature of the investigation. Because such violence raises an important question. Why? Why invest so much planning? Why create false identities? Why arrange a meeting under deceptive circumstances? Why target this particular woman? Every theory begins there. And every theory eventually encounters the same obstacle. No clear answer. As minutes passed outside the property, nothing appeared unusual. The street remained quiet. Neighbors carried on with their evening routines. No screams echoed into the neighborhood. No dramatic struggle drew attention. No obvious emergency unfolded in public view. That silence is disturbing. Violence often leaves traces. Noise. Chaos. Witnesses. But in this case, the silence seemed almost complete. Whatever happened inside that house happened largely beyond observation. Time continued moving forward. The appointment stretched on. Jason remained nearby. Waiting. Expecting the showing to conclude. Expecting Lindsay to reappear. Perhaps expecting a phone call or text once everything finished. Instead, communication stopped. Messages went unanswered. At first, the lack of response may not have seemed alarming. Business meetings can become distracting. People miss notifications. Conversations run longer than expected. Yet as additional minutes passed, concern began growing. A subtle discomfort transformed into worry. The kind of worry that becomes impossible to ignore. Eventually, waiting no longer felt reasonable. Something felt wrong. Deeply wrong. Jason approached the property. The house remained quiet. The evening air had grown colder. Darkness was beginning to settle over the neighborhood. From the outside, nothing appeared unusual. No broken windows. No visible disturbance. Just a large, silent house standing beneath the fading light. The front door was locked. That detail immediately complicated the situation. A locked door creates questions. Questions that still linger. Who locked it? When? For what reason? At that moment, nobody knew. What mattered was that Lindsay could not be reached. Concern intensified. Attempts were made to contact emergency services. The situation had shifted from uncertainty to fear. The transition happened quickly. A growing suspicion that something was wrong transformed into the realization that something terrible may already have happened. Inside the house, hidden behind walls and closed doors, the truth waited. The discovery that followed would permanently alter countless lives. When entry was finally made into the residence, the illusion collapsed. The business appointment. The wealthy clients. The routine property showing. All of it disappeared instantly. In its place stood a homicide scene. Lindsay was found inside an upstairs bedroom. She had suffered multiple stab wounds. The attack had been fatal. The young woman who had entered the property expecting a professional meeting would never leave it alive. Shock arrived immediately. The scene before responders was not consistent with robbery. Not consistent with sexual assault. Not consistent with many of the explanations investigators typically consider first. Instead, the circumstances suggested something far more disturbing. A targeted attack. A deliberate attack. A killing that appeared to focus entirely on one objective. Lindsay herself. As emergency personnel secured the scene, reality began spreading outward from the house. Police officers. Investigators. Family members. Friends. Each would soon confront the same devastating truth. A 24-year-old woman was dead. And almost nothing about the circumstances made sense. Outside, the neighborhood remained eerily calm. The same streets. The same houses. The same winter evening. Yet everything had changed. Behind police tape and flashing lights, a mystery was taking shape. One that would survive years of investigation. One that would generate theories across Canada and beyond. One that would leave detectives searching for answers long after memories faded and evidence grew cold. Somewhere between the moment Lindsay welcomed those visitors into the house and the moment her body was discovered, a carefully constructed plan had reached its conclusion. The people responsible had vanished. The false identities remained false. The questions remained unanswered. And the investigation had only just begun. What happened inside that house would haunt everyone connected to the case. But what investigators discovered afterward would prove even more unsettling. Because the deeper they looked into the crime scene, the more it appeared that the killers had prepared for almost everything. In many homicide investigations, the crime itself lasts only minutes. The discovery lasts forever. The moment someone realizes that an ordinary day has transformed into a nightmare becomes permanently embedded in memory. Every detail sharpens. Every image freezes in place. Every second stretches unnaturally long. For the people connected to Lindsay Buziak, that moment began with silence. Not the peaceful silence of a quiet evening. Not the comfortable silence that settles over a suburban neighborhood after sunset. This was a different kind of silence. The kind that appears when something expected fails to happen. The kind that slowly grows heavier. The kind that makes people check their phones again. And again. And again. The appointment should have been ending. The clients should have completed their tour. Lindsay should have emerged from the house. A text message should have arrived. A call should have been returned. Something should have happened. Instead, nothing happened. The absence of communication became impossible to ignore. Outside, the neighborhood remained calm. Streetlights illuminated driveways. Windows glowed warmly from occupied homes. Residents continued moving through their evening routines completely unaware that a homicide scene was already hidden among them. Few things are more unsettling than the contrast between normal life and sudden tragedy. One house contains families eating dinner. Another contains a murder victim. One street hosts ordinary conversations. A few doors away, detectives will soon begin searching for a killer. The world rarely pauses when tragedy occurs. It simply continues moving. As concern intensified, attention shifted toward the property itself. The vacant house sat motionless beneath the evening sky. Nothing about its exterior announced what waited inside. No signs of forced entry. No visible damage. No indication that violence had occurred. The structure appeared exactly as it had before. A clean, modern home in a desirable neighborhood. An empty property waiting for future owners. Only now, it concealed a terrible secret. When entry was eventually made into the residence, uncertainty ended. Fear became reality. The realization arrived instantly. Something catastrophic had happened. The details of crime scene discoveries often become blurred over time, but certain moments never lose their impact. The moment someone sees what cannot be unseen. The moment hope disappears. The moment an investigation officially begins. For first responders and investigators, these moments demand professionalism. Emotion must be controlled. Focus becomes essential. Procedures take over. Evidence must be protected. The scene must be secured. Questions must be asked. Yet beneath every professional response remains a simple human truth. Someone has died. Someone's family is about to receive devastating news. Someone's future has ended. Inside the upstairs bedroom, Lindsay was found dead. The discovery immediately transformed the property from a real estate listing into a crime scene. Every room suddenly mattered. Every object mattered. Every footprint. Every fingerprint. Every fiber. Every possible trace left behind by the people responsible. Investigators quickly recognized the seriousness of the situation. This was not a suspicious death requiring clarification. This was homicide. The violence inflicted upon Lindsay made that unmistakably clear. As detectives arrived and the crime scene expanded, the empty house began revealing pieces of a story. Not the complete story. Not enough to identify a killer. But enough to understand that this crime was unlike many others. One of the first observations immediately stood out. There appeared to be no obvious motive visible at the scene. Nothing suggested a burglary gone wrong. Expensive property remained untouched. Personal belongings had not been systematically removed. The environment lacked the signs commonly associated with theft. If robbery had been the objective, it was difficult to see evidence supporting that theory. Another possibility also appeared absent. Investigators found no immediate indication that sexual assault had occurred. This mattered because such crimes often provide insight into offender motivation. Yet here, the circumstances pointed elsewhere. If money was not the goal and sexual violence was not the goal, what remained? That question became central to the investigation almost immediately. The answer seemed increasingly disturbing. The target may not have been something Lindsay possessed. The target may have been Lindsay herself. That realization changes everything. Because when a victim appears to be the objective, investigators begin searching for motive within relationships, personal history, conflicts, and hidden connections. Someone wanted her dead. But who? And why? The upstairs bedroom soon became one of the most heavily scrutinized locations in Canadian criminal investigative history. Forensic specialists examined every available detail. Measurements were taken. Photographs documented the scene. Evidence was collected. Nothing could be overlooked. Every inch of the room held potential significance. The challenge was that crime scenes rarely speak clearly. They provide fragments. Moments frozen in time. Physical traces left behind by human actions. Investigators must transform those fragments into a narrative. Sometimes the narrative emerges quickly. Sometimes it never fully appears. The Lindsay Busiak case would prove to be the latter. As forensic work continued, another troubling reality emerged. The crime scene appeared surprisingly clean. Not literally clean. Violence had occurred. Evidence existed. But the kinds of evidence detectives often rely upon seemed frustratingly limited. No obvious treasure trove of forensic clues waited to be discovered. No straightforward path led directly to a suspect. The absence of evidence became evidence itself. Experienced investigators understand that criminals frequently make mistakes. They panic. They rush. They leave traces behind. Fingerprints. DNA. Witnesses. Digital footprints. Mistakes are common because human beings are imperfect. Yet in this case, whoever committed the murder appeared to have exercised remarkable control. That observation created a new and deeply unsettling possibility. Perhaps this was not an impulsive crime. Perhaps planning had occurred long before February 2nd. Perhaps the meeting itself had been designed solely to place Lindsay inside the house. If true, the implications were enormous. It would mean the property showing was never truly about real estate. The clients were never clients. The appointment was merely a mechanism. A carefully constructed illusion. An elaborate deception built for one purpose: to get Lindsay alone. As police expanded their investigation, attention quickly shifted toward the mysterious visitors. The man. The woman. The last known people to see Lindsay alive. Their importance was obvious. If identified, they could potentially explain everything. Yet almost immediately, investigators encountered a major problem. Nobody knew who they were. Their names were false. Their backgrounds were unknown. Their connection to Lindsay remained unclear. They seemed to have appeared briefly, completed their objective, and vanished. Witness descriptions offered some assistance. People recalled seeing a well-dressed couple. A blonde woman. A tall dark-haired man. Reasonably distinctive. Yet not distinctive enough. Not enough to produce immediate identification. Not enough to generate arrests. The search for the pair would continue for years. As news of the homicide spread throughout Victoria, shock quickly turned into fascination. The circumstances felt extraordinary. A young realtor. A luxury home. Mystery clients. A targeted killing. Disappearing suspects. The elements seemed almost cinematic. Yet the pain behind them was painfully real. Friends struggled to understand how such a thing could happen. Family members found themselves confronting unimaginable grief. Community members questioned assumptions about safety. If someone could orchestrate a murder in this manner, what did that say about the world around them? The investigation intensified. Phone records became important. Witness interviews multiplied. Timelines were reconstructed. Movements were analyzed. Relationships were examined. Detectives began following every lead available. One lead quickly attracted significant attention. The phone used to contact Lindsay. At first glance, it appeared promising. Every communication leaves traces. Every phone has a history. Every number tells a story. Investigators hoped the phone would reveal identities. Instead, it revealed planning. The number had been acquired specifically for contacting Lindsay. A disposable device. Purchased under false circumstances. Used sparingly. Then abandoned. The discovery was both informative and frustrating. It suggested preparation. It suggested intent. But it did not immediately reveal the people responsible. The deeper investigators looked, the more organized the operation appeared. The phone seemed planned. The meeting seemed planned. The location seemed planned. Even the escape appeared planned. For detectives, such findings often create a mixture of admiration and frustration. Admiration for the complexity of the operation. Frustration because complexity makes cases harder to solve. Meanwhile, the emotional consequences continued expanding outward. A family waited for answers. Friends waited for answers. An entire community waited for answers. Yet answers proved elusive. Days became weeks. Weeks became months. The murder remained unsolved. And still, the crime scene continued haunting investigators. Because every examination led back to the same troubling conclusion. The offenders appeared prepared. Perhaps exceptionally prepared. Prepared enough to minimize evidence. Prepared enough to disappear. Prepared enough to leave behind a mystery rather than a straightforward investigation. Years later, many detectives and analysts would revisit the same question. Was the apparent professionalism genuine? Or was it merely the appearance of professionalism created by fortunate circumstances? The distinction matters. A highly skilled offender suggests one type of suspect. A lucky offender suggests another. But in the immediate aftermath, certainty remained impossible. What investigators knew was limited. A young woman had been lured into a vacant house. She had been murdered. The people believed responsible had vanished. The crime scene offered clues but not solutions. And every hour that passed allowed the trail to grow colder. As police worked through evidence and witness statements, another reality slowly emerged. This would not be a quick investigation. There would be no immediate confession. No obvious suspect waiting to be arrested. No dramatic breakthrough in the first 48 hours. Instead, the Lindsay Busiak case was becoming something far more difficult. A puzzle. A maze. A mystery built from missing pieces. And somewhere beyond those missing pieces stood at least one person who knew exactly what had happened inside that house. Someone who walked away. Someone who remained silent. Someone who understood the truth while investigators searched desperately for it. The hunt for that truth was only beginning. And before long, detectives would find themselves exploring a growing list of suspects, theories, rumors, and dead ends that would consume years of investigation without delivering the one thing everyone wanted most. A name. Every murder investigation begins with a simple objective. Find the truth. But some cases resist that objective from the very beginning. Every answer produces new questions. Every promising lead fades into uncertainty. Every apparent breakthrough reveals another dead end waiting beyond it. The murder of Lindsay Busiak quickly became one of those cases. In the days following the discovery of her body, investigators from the Sanic Police Department faced enormous pressure. A young woman had been killed inside a vacant home. The circumstances suggested planning. The suspects had vanished. The community wanted answers. The family wanted justice. And detectives needed to determine whether they were searching for a single killer, multiple offenders, or a larger conspiracy hidden beneath the surface. At first, the investigation followed the familiar path of most homicide cases. Detectives started with the victim. Who was Lindsay? Who knew her? Who had recently interacted with her? Who might have possessed a motive? Who might have benefited from her death? The process was methodical. Every friendship? Every professional connection? Every family relationship? Every romantic relationship? Nothing could be ignored. Experienced investigators understand that victims often hold the key to identifying offenders. The answer is frequently found within the victim's world. A former partner. A jealous acquaintance. A financial dispute. A hidden conflict. A personal grudge. Most murders are not committed by mysterious strangers. Most involve people connected to the victim in some way. Yet the Lindsay Busiak case seemed determined to defy expectations. The deeper investigators looked, the stranger the picture became. One of the earliest priorities involved reconstructing the timeline leading to the appointment. The mysterious phone calls immediately attracted attention. Who was the woman who contacted Lindsay? Why had she insisted on working with her? How had she obtained Lindsay's contact information? What was the true purpose of arranging the property showing? These questions became central to the investigation. Detectives traced the phone number used during the communications. What they discovered was troubling. The number belonged to a prepaid phone. A disposable device. Purchased specifically for limited use. The phone had not been used extensively. It had not generated a rich history of contacts. It had not created a large digital footprint. Instead, it appeared almost surgical in its purpose. Contact Lindsay. Arrange the meeting. Disappear. For investigators, the implications were obvious. This was not the behavior of a spontaneous offender. This was planning. Someone had invested time and effort into creating distance between themselves and the crime. The phone represented preparation. Preparation suggests intent. Intent suggests purpose. Yet purpose remained frustratingly unclear. As detectives expanded their inquiries, they examined witness statements collected from individuals near the crime scene. Several witnesses recalled seeing the mysterious couple. Descriptions varied slightly, as witness descriptions often do. Human memory is imperfect. People notice different details. Different clothing. Different physical characteristics. Different movements. Yet certain themes remained consistent. A well-dressed blonde woman. A tall dark-haired man. Calm demeanor. Nothing outwardly suspicious. The descriptions helped investigators produce sketches and public appeals. Unfortunately, identifying strangers based on limited observations is an extraordinarily difficult task. The sketches generated public discussion. Tips arrived. Names surfaced. Possibilities emerged. But none produced the breakthrough detectives desperately needed. The couple remained unidentified. As weeks turned into months, investigators broadened their focus. The possibility of a personal motive gained attention. Many detectives believed the crime possessed characteristics associated with targeted violence. The elaborate setup suggested that Lindsay herself had been selected. If true, the obvious question followed. Why? Some investigators suspected the answer might be found within her personal life. Others believed the motive might be hidden within professional relationships. Still others considered the possibility that she had unknowingly become connected to people far more dangerous than she realized. The challenge was separating fact from speculation. And speculation quickly became a major problem. High-profile unsolved murders tend to generate theories. The Lindsay Busiak case generated many. Some theories appeared plausible. Others seemed increasingly unlikely. But each required investigation because detectives could not afford to overlook any possibility. One area of intense scrutiny involved people closest to Lindsay. This is standard procedure in homicide investigations. Family members are interviewed. Friends are interviewed. Romantic partners are interviewed. Investigators verify timelines, compare statements, and search for inconsistencies. The process can feel intrusive. Sometimes painful. But it remains necessary. Among the individuals receiving significant attention was Jason Zylo. As Lindsay's boyfriend, he occupied a central position in the timeline. He had known about the appointment. He had remained nearby during the showing. He was among the first people connected to the discovery. Because of these facts, public attention naturally focused on him. The scrutiny intensified over time. Supporters of various theories questioned his actions. Critics analyzed timelines. Internet discussions dissected every available detail. Investigators examined his statements and activities thoroughly. Yet despite years of speculation, no charges have ever been filed against him in connection with the murder. The distinction between suspicion and evidence became increasingly important throughout the case. Many people attracted attention. Very few could be linked to actual evidence. That gap would haunt the investigation for years. Another area of interest involved individuals connected to broader social circles surrounding Lindsay's life. Detectives explored acquaintances, business contacts, former relationships, and secondary connections. The goal was simple. Find a motive. Find a conflict. Find a reason. Yet each avenue seemed to end the same way. Questions without answers. Possibilities without proof. As frustration grew, another theory began attracting attention. The drug connection theory. This theory emerged because some individuals loosely connected to Lindsay's wider social environment would later become associated with significant drug trafficking investigations. The possibility immediately captured public imagination. Drug trafficking organizations possess resources. They possess experience with violence. They possess reasons to silence perceived threats. To some observers, the theory appeared compelling. Perhaps Lindsay had seen something. Perhaps she knew something. Perhaps she had become involved unknowingly. Perhaps she represented a risk. The theory seemed dramatic, potentially plausible, and deeply unsettling. Investigators explored it extensively. Yet despite years of discussion, no definitive evidence emerged linking Lindsay directly to organized drug activity or proving that drug traffickers ordered her murder. The theory persisted largely because alternative explanations remained equally incomplete. When certainty is absent, speculation flourishes. And few cases generated more speculation than this one. Another question continued troubling investigators. How much information did the killers possess before the crime? The appointment appeared carefully arranged. The location appeared carefully selected. The timing appeared deliberate. Someone knew enough about Lindsay to create a believable scenario. Someone understood aspects of her professional life. Someone anticipated her behavior. That realization suggested insider knowledge. Perhaps not intimate knowledge, but meaningful knowledge. Knowledge sufficient to predict where she would be and how she would respond. This possibility narrowed the field in one sense while expanding it in another. If the offenders possessed inside information, they may have been connected to someone within her social or professional environment. But identifying that connection proved extraordinarily difficult. The investigation became a maze. Each path branched into multiple directions. Each direction produced additional uncertainty. Meanwhile, public fascination continued growing. Media coverage expanded. Documentaries appeared. Podcasts analyzed theories. Online forums filled with discussions. Armchair detectives studied timelines and witness statements. Thousands of people attempted to solve the mystery. Yet professional investigators faced a reality that outsiders often overlook. They possessed far more information than the public. And even with that information, they could not reach a definitive conclusion. Years passed. Evidence was re-examined. New technologies became available. Fresh tips arrived. Old leads were revisited. Detectives continued working the case long after media attention faded. Cold cases often die quietly. This one refused to disappear. Partly because the circumstances remained so unusual. Partly because Lindsay's family remained vocal in their pursuit of justice. And partly because the unanswered questions felt impossible to ignore. Who purchased the disposable phone? Who made the calls? Who was the blonde woman? Who was the dark-haired man? Why was Lindsay targeted? Why choose such an elaborate method? What was the true motive? These questions lingered year after year. And despite extensive investigative efforts, none received definitive answers. The absence of resolution gradually became one of the defining characteristics of the case. Every promising lead seemed to dissolve before reaching a conclusion. Witnesses remembered fragments but not enough. Records provided clues but not enough. Circumstantial evidence suggested possibilities but not enough. Again and again, investigators approached the edge of understanding only to find another gap waiting beyond it. For Lindsay's family, this uncertainty carried its own unique cruelty. A solved murder brings grief. An unsolved murder brings grief and endless questions. Families remain trapped between hope and frustration. Hope that answers will emerge. Frustration that they have not. The passage of time offers little relief. Birthdays pass. Anniversaries pass. Years pass. Yet the mystery remains frozen. Waiting. Unanswered. By the time investigators entered the second decade of the case, one truth had become increasingly clear. If the murder was going to be solved, it would likely require something more than traditional detective work. A new witness. A confession. An overlooked clue. A technological breakthrough. Something capable of illuminating the darkness that had surrounded the investigation from the beginning. And eventually, there were signs that such a breakthrough might be possible. Not because the mystery had become simpler, but because science was evolving. Technology was advancing. And evidence once considered silent might finally be preparing to speak. In many true crime stories, there comes a moment when everything changes. A forgotten witness steps forward. A hidden recording surfaces. A suspect confesses. A single piece of evidence suddenly transforms confusion into certainty. Investigators call it a breakthrough. Families call it hope. Audiences call it the turning point. But in the Lindsay Busiak case, the idea of a breakthrough became something far more complicated. Because after years of searching, detectives never uncovered the one revelation that explained everything. Instead, they experienced something different. A series of partial breakthroughs. Fragments of light appearing briefly inside a very dark room. Enough to suggest progress. Not enough to reveal the entire truth. As the years passed, the case entered a new phase. The initial urgency of the investigation had faded. The crime scene had long since been processed. Witness interviews had been completed. Thousands of pages of reports had been written. Detectives had followed lead after lead. And still, the central mystery remained intact. Many investigations lose momentum at this stage. Evidence grows older. Memories become less reliable. Witnesses relocate. Potential suspects become harder to find. The passage of time is often a criminal's greatest ally. Yet the Lindsay Busiak case refused to disappear. Partly because of its unusual circumstances. Partly because of public interest. And partly because Lindsay's family continued demanding answers. For them, the investigation was not a file sitting inside a cabinet. It was a daily reality. A permanent wound. A question that followed them every morning and every night. Who killed Lindsay? The years after the murder became a strange battle against time. Detectives knew that waiting carried risks. Every month that passed created additional obstacles. Witness recollections weakened. Potential evidence deteriorated. Opportunities vanished. At the same time, however, technology continued improving. And that technological evolution offered something investigators desperately needed. Possibility. When Lindsay was murdered in 2008, forensic science was already sophisticated. But it was not what it would become. Techniques improved dramatically over the following decade. DNA analysis became more sensitive. Digital investigations became more powerful. Data recovery methods advanced. Evidence previously considered insignificant sometimes gained new value. Cold case investigators around the world began solving crimes that had remained mysteries for decades. Cases from the 1970s. Cases from the 1980s. Cases once believed impossible to solve. Suddenly, they were producing arrests. Those successes created hope for families everywhere. Including Lindsay's. If science could solve old mysteries elsewhere, perhaps it could solve this one too. Investigators returned repeatedly to the evidence. Not because they had failed previously, but because modern tools might reveal details invisible years earlier. A single overlooked trace could change everything. A tiny biological sample. A forgotten record. A connection hidden within data. The challenge was that the Lindsay Busiak case appeared unusually resistant to forensic breakthroughs. The crime scene had never produced the kind of overwhelming physical evidence detectives dream about. The offenders appeared careful, methodical, deliberate. If they made mistakes, those mistakes were difficult to identify. Still, investigators continued searching. Because unsolved cases often depend upon persistence. Not brilliance. Not luck. Persistence. Looking again. Reviewing again. Questioning assumptions again. Sometimes the answer emerges only because someone refuses to stop asking questions. Public pressure also played a role. As years passed, documentaries, investigative programs, podcasts, and independent researchers kept the case alive. New audiences discovered the story. New theories emerged. New discussions began. Each wave of attention generated additional tips. Most led nowhere. A few created new avenues of inquiry. This process is often misunderstood. Many people imagine breakthroughs arriving dramatically. In reality, they often arrive quietly. A phone call. An email. A witness who finally feels ready to speak. An observation that seemed insignificant years earlier. The smallest detail can alter an entire investigation. Detectives understood this. Which is why they continued encouraging public cooperation. Someone knew something. Someone had always known something. The challenge was convincing that person to come forward. One possibility haunted investigators. What if the truth existed within a social circle connected to the crime? What if people possessed fragments of information without realizing their importance? What if fear prevented witnesses from speaking openly? These questions became increasingly significant as years passed. Because the murder itself suggested planning. And planning rarely occurs in complete isolation. Theories continued evolving. Some investigators believed the motive remained deeply personal. Others considered broader criminal connections. Still others focused on individuals who may have possessed inside knowledge of Lindsay's schedule and professional activities. No theory fully explained every detail. Yet none could be completely dismissed either. The result was a case filled with possibilities but lacking certainty. That uncertainty became one of the investigation's defining characteristics. Then came another source of hope. Advances in DNA technology. Across North America, cold cases were being reopened using methods unavailable at the time of the original investigations. Tiny biological samples once considered unusable suddenly became valuable. Forensic genealogical techniques demonstrated astonishing potential in some cases. Public awareness of these successes grew rapidly. Families of unsolved murder victims began asking the same question. Could modern science finally identify the killer? The possibility generated renewed attention around Lindsay's case. Investigators publicly acknowledged that evolving forensic capabilities continued offering opportunities. That statement may sound modest. But for cold case families, it carries enormous significance. Opportunity means hope. Hope means the story is not over. Hope means someone is still searching. Yet hope can also be painful. Because every new possibility creates expectations. Every announcement creates anticipation. Every potential breakthrough raises the same question. Is this finally the moment? For Lindsay's family, those moments arrived repeatedly. And repeatedly, certainty remained out of reach. The years transformed the investigation into something unusual. It was no longer simply a search for suspects. It became a search for understanding. Detectives wanted to know not only who committed the crime, but how such a crime could be planned so effectively. How were false identities created? How was Lindsay selected? Who possessed enough information to orchestrate the meeting? How many people were involved? The deeper investigators looked, the more sophisticated the operation appeared. This realization created a troubling possibility. Perhaps the most important evidence had never been physical. Perhaps it existed inside human memory. Inside conversations. Inside secrets. Inside relationships. If true, the case might ultimately depend upon someone deciding to speak. Someone carrying knowledge for years. Someone protecting another person. Someone waiting. The concept appears repeatedly throughout unsolved criminal investigations. A hidden witness. A silent accomplice. A person burdened by information they cannot forget. Whether such an individual exists in the Lindsay Busiak case remains unknown. But detectives have never stopped acting as though the possibility matters. Because history has demonstrated that silence rarely lasts forever. People change. Relationships change. Loyalties change. Fear changes. The passage of time affects everyone. Secrets that seem secure for years sometimes collapse unexpectedly. An argument. A breakup. A guilty conscience. A deathbed confession. The reason varies. The result does not. Truth emerges. That possibility remains one of the most significant hopes attached to the investigation. Meanwhile, every anniversary of the murder serves as a reminder that the case remains unresolved. Photographs of Lindsay continue appearing in media coverage. Public appeals continue. Questions continue. And each passing year creates a strange contradiction. The crime grows older. Yet the mystery remains fresh. New generations encounter the story for the first time. They ask the same questions people asked in 2008. Who were the mysterious clients? Why was Lindsay targeted? How did the killers disappear? What really happened inside that house? The fact that those questions remain unanswered after so many years is itself remarkable. Most murders eventually produce conclusions. Arrests. Trials. Confessions. Even if justice arrives late, it usually arrives. The Lindsay Busiak case stands apart because the central mystery remains stubbornly intact. And yet, despite that reality, investigators have never described the case as abandoned. Unsolved does not mean forgotten. Cold does not mean dead. Files continue to be reviewed. Evidence continues to be examined. Tips continue to be assessed. Possibilities continue to exist. That is perhaps the most important takeaway from this stage of the story. The breakthrough has not fully arrived. Not yet. But neither has the ending. The investigation remains open. The search remains active. The hope remains alive. Somewhere, whether hidden within evidence, memory, or conscience, the truth still exists. It has existed from the very beginning. From the moment Lindsay welcomed those strangers through the front door. From the moment the trap closed. From the moment the killers walked away. The truth has never disappeared. Only our ability to see it. And until that truth finally emerges, the case remains suspended between mystery and resolution, waiting for the one discovery capable of changing everything. A discovery that could arrive tomorrow. Or years from now. But whenever it arrives, it will not simply answer questions. It will finally give a name to the shadow that has haunted this case since February 2, 2008. Most true crime stories eventually arrive at a courtroom. The long investigation reaches its destination. A suspect sits before a judge. Evidence is presented. Witnesses testify. A jury deliberates. A verdict is delivered. And somewhere within that process, a family finally receives an answer. Not always the answer they hoped for. Not always complete closure. But an answer nonetheless. The Lindsay Busiak case never reached that moment. No defendant entered a courtroom. No prosecutor stood before a jury and explained the motive. No witness pointed toward the killer and identified them with certainty. No verdict was announced. No sentence was imposed. The chapter that usually defines justice remains unwritten. And perhaps that is what makes this case so emotionally difficult. Not only because a young woman lost her life, but because the story never progressed to the stage where society officially names those responsible. For most people, justice feels tangible. An arrest, a conviction, a prison sentence, a public acknowledgement that wrongdoing occurred and that the person responsible has been held accountable. These moments create a sense of order, a sense that even after tragedy, the system can still function. The Lindsay Busiak investigation challenges that belief. Because despite years of effort, despite extensive investigation, despite public attention and countless theories, the central question remains unresolved. Who should be standing trial? The answer has never been established. For Lindsay's family, this reality created a second tragedy. The first tragedy occurred on February 2, 2008. The second unfolded slowly across the years that followed. It was the tragedy of uncertainty. A type of suffering that does not end when a funeral concludes. A type of suffering that returns repeatedly. Every anniversary. Every birthday. Every holiday. Every news story. Every unanswered question. When a murder remains unsolved, grief becomes intertwined with investigation. Family members find themselves trapped between mourning and searching, unable to fully move forward because the story itself remains unfinished. The pursuit of justice becomes part of daily life. In many cases, families eventually step away from public attention. The emotional cost becomes too great. The exhaustion becomes overwhelming. But Lindsay's family chose a different path. They remained visible. They remained vocal. They continued asking questions long after media attention faded. Their persistence became one of the defining features of the case. Because while investigators searched through evidence, Lindsay's loved ones searched for accountability. Not merely for a conviction. For answers. The distinction matters. Justice begins with truth. Before a courtroom can function, facts must exist. Before punishment can occur, responsibility must be established. Without truth, justice remains incomplete. And truth has always been the missing piece in this story. The years following the murder created growing tension between what was known and what remained unknown. Investigators possessed evidence. Witnesses provided statements. Theories emerged. Suspicions circulated. Yet none of those elements crossed the threshold necessary for prosecution. Public speculation filled the gap. Names appeared in discussions. Relationships were scrutinized. Motives were debated. Online communities developed entire frameworks explaining what they believed had happened. Some theories gained popularity. Others faded. But popularity is not evidence. Suspicion is not proof. And in a courtroom, proof is everything. This distinction often frustrates the public. People want certainty. They want conclusions. They want villains and resolutions. Reality is rarely so cooperative. Investigators must operate within legal standards. The burden of proof exists for a reason. A person cannot be convicted because a theory feels convincing. They cannot be imprisoned because public opinion demands an answer. Evidence must withstand scrutiny. Facts must survive challenge. Truth must be demonstrated. In the Lindsay Busiak case, that threshold has never been reached. And so the courtroom remains empty. No trial. No verdict. No sentencing. Only questions. Yet justice is not limited to legal proceedings. There is another form of justice. A quieter form. One measured not in convictions but in persistence. The refusal to forget. The refusal to allow a victim's story to disappear. the refusal to surrender to silence. In that sense, Lindsay's family has spent years pursuing justice in its broadest form. Keeping attention on the case. Encouraging witnesses to come forward. Demanding continued investigation. Refusing to accept that time alone should determine whether a murder is solved. This effort matters because unsolved cases often depend upon memory. The public remembers. Witnesses remember. Communities remember. And memory creates pressure. Pressure creates movement. Movement creates opportunities. Some of the most famous cold cases in history were eventually solved because someone refused to let them disappear. A detective continued reviewing files. A journalist continued asking questions. A family continued demanding answers. The Lindsay Busiak case remains part of that tradition. A story sustained by persistence. Yet persistence carries a cost. Imagine living year after year without knowing why someone you love was murdered. Imagine hearing theories but never receiving confirmation. Imagine seeing strangers discuss possibilities while the truth remains hidden. Imagine wondering whether the person responsible is still walking freely. Still living an ordinary life. Still carrying the secret. That burden becomes difficult to comprehend. Most people encounter injustice briefly. Families of unsolved homicide victims encounter it continuously. Every passing year becomes another reminder. Another indication that accountability has not arrived. And yet hope survives. Hope is a strange force within cold cases. It weakens. Returns. Disappears. Returns again. A new witness. A technological advancement. A public appeal. Each development reignites possibility. Perhaps this will be the lead that changes everything. Perhaps this will be the breakthrough. Perhaps this will finally bring justice. Those hopes have appeared many times throughout the investigation. So far, none have produced the outcome everyone seeks. Still, they continue. Because abandoning hope would mean accepting silence. And silence is something Lindsay's family has consistently refused to do. The concept of justice also raises another uncomfortable question. What happens if the truth is eventually discovered? Imagine that tomorrow investigators identify the individuals responsible. Imagine arrests occur. Imagine the case finally reaches court. Would justice truly be complete? The answer is complicated. A conviction cannot restore a lost life. A prison sentence cannot erase years of grief. A guilty verdict cannot return a daughter to her family. Certain losses remain permanent. Justice cannot undo tragedy. It can only acknowledge it. It can only establish responsibility. It can only confirm that what happened mattered. That society recognizes the wrong. That the victim's life possessed value. That accountability exists. Perhaps that is why unsolved murders feel so unsettling. Not simply because the offender remains free, but because accountability remains incomplete. The moral balance remains unresolved. A question continues hanging in the air. Who did this? Until that question receives an answer, the story remains unfinished. For investigators, unfinished cases become professional burdens. For families, they become personal burdens. For communities, they become collective burdens. The Lindsay Busiak case carries all three. Years have passed. Children have grown into adults. Technology has transformed. The world of 2008 feels increasingly distant. Yet the fundamental issue remains exactly the same. A 24-year-old woman was murdered. The individuals responsible have not been identified publicly. And justice, at least in its traditional form, remains absent. Still, there is one important distinction that must be remembered. Absent is not the same as impossible. History contains countless examples of cases solved after decades. Cases once considered hopeless. Cases that suddenly changed because one person spoke. One mistake surfaced. One forgotten clue was rediscovered. The passage of time creates obstacles. But it can also create opportunities. People age. Relationships fracture. Secrets become harder to carry. The truth develops pressure. Eventually, that pressure can become unbearable. Perhaps that moment still lies ahead. Perhaps someone knows far more than they have ever admitted. Perhaps someone wakes up every morning carrying knowledge of what happened inside that house. Knowledge hidden behind years of silence. If that person exists, then justice may simply be waiting. Waiting for courage. Waiting for conscience. Waiting for the moment when truth finally outweighs fear. Until then, the courtroom remains empty. The verdict remains unwritten. The sentence remains unspoken. And the search for justice continues. Not as a legal process. Not yet. But as a promise. A promise made by investigators. A promise made by family. A promise made by everyone who refuses to forget Lindsay Buziak. A promise that despite the passing years, despite the uncertainty, despite the frustration and grief, the pursuit of truth will continue. Because justice delayed is painful. Justice denied is devastating. But justice still being pursued means the story is not over. And as long as the story is not over, there remains the possibility that one day, somewhere, someone will finally be forced to answer for what happened inside that house on a cold February evening in 2008. When a story like this reaches its final chapter, people often expect resolution. A name revealed. A motive explained. A chain of events finally made clear enough to understand. But some stories resist closure. They remain suspended in time. Not because nothing happened, but because everything that happened still cannot be fully explained. The murder of Lindsay Buziak is one of those stories. Nearly 2 decades have passed since that cold February evening in 2008, yet the core questions remain unchanged. Who were the people who walked into that house? Why was Lindsay specifically chosen? What kind of planning allowed strangers to construct such an elaborate deception? And perhaps the most haunting question of all. How can someone vanish so completely after committing such a carefully prepared act of violence? Time has moved forward in every possible way except one. It has not delivered answers. For the family, time has been a strange companion. It brings distance from the moment of tragedy, yet never distance from the questions. It allows life to continue, yet prevents the story from ending. Every year adds another layer of absence. Another reminder that something essential remains unresolved. In cases like this, people outside the situation often focus on mystery. They analyze timelines. They debate suspects. They revisit theories. They search for patterns that might finally unlock the truth. But for those who lived through the loss, the mystery is not the center of the story. The absence is. The absence of a voice that once filled a room. The absence of future conversations that will never happen. The absence of ordinary moments that should have followed. A life reduced not to the way it was lived, but to the way it ended. That is the cruel imbalance at the heart of every unsolved murder. The victim becomes defined by their final day, while everything before it slowly fades in public memory. Yet Lindsay Buziak was not defined by the night she was killed. She was defined by everything that came before it. Her ambitions. Her relationships. Her presence in the lives of people who knew her. Her efforts to build a future in a competitive and demanding profession. Her willingness to trust others in a world where trust is both necessary and risky. Those qualities matter because they remind us of something often lost in true crime narratives. This was not just a case. This was a person. A young woman whose life intersected with something dark and still unexplained. As investigators continue to revisit the case, one truth remains constant. The original crime has never been adequately explained in public terms. Not through a confirmed suspect. Not through a verified motive. Not through a completed legal process. The silence surrounding those answers is not empty. It is full of implications. It suggests planning. It suggests knowledge. It suggests intention. But it does not yet provide identity. That gap between implication and certainty is where the case continues to exist. In that space, theories grow. In that space, hope survives. In that space, frustration persists. And in that space, the search for truth continues. One of the most important lessons this case offers is how fragile certainty can be. At first glance, the events appear almost structured like a narrative designed for understanding. A phone call. A meeting. A location. A victim. A disappearance. Yet when examined closely, that structure collapses into uncertainty. Every piece leads to another question. Every detail resists final interpretation. Even the strongest investigative efforts cannot fully bridge the gap between what is known and what must be assumed. That is what makes this case endure. Not clarity, but absence of clarity. There is also a deeper lesson hidden beneath the details. Danger does not always announce itself. It does not always arrive in chaotic or obvious forms. Sometimes it arrives dressed as opportunity. Sometimes it arrives through conversation. Sometimes it arrives through trust placed in the ordinary mechanics of daily life. A phone call about a property. A meeting scheduled at a vacant home. A professional interaction that seems routine until it is not. The events of that evening remind us how easily normalcy can be used as a disguise. And how quickly normalcy can disappear. For those who study true crime, there is often a temptation to search for extraordinary explanations. Sophisticated criminals. Complex conspiracies. Elaborate motives. But sometimes the most unsettling aspect of a case is not how unusual it is, but how ordinary the final moments appear before everything changes. A car arriving. A door opening. A conversation beginning. Nothing about those moments suggests they will be the last. Another lesson lies in the persistence of those who refuse to forget. Cases like this do not remain in public awareness by accident. They remain because people continue to speak. Continue to ask. Continue to demand attention long after the world has moved on. Families who carry grief do not have the option of forgetting. Their memories are not archival. They are lived. Daily. Continuously. And that persistence matters more than most people realize. Many investigations that eventually succeed do so because someone refused to let silence win. A witness who finally speaks. A detail that resurfaces. A memory that becomes important years later. The passage of time does not only erode information. It sometimes reveals it. That possibility is what keeps cold cases alive. It is what keeps investigators returning to files long after they were first closed. It is what keeps families holding on to hope even when that hope feels distant. In the case of Lindsay Buziak, that hope remains tied to a simple idea. That someone knows something. Not speculation. Not theory. But knowledge. Something witnessed. Something heard. Something remembered but never fully shared. And perhaps, somewhere, that knowledge still exists. Carried quietly. Protected by time. Waiting for the moment it is finally spoken. If that moment arrives, it will not only reshape the investigation. It will reshape everything that came before it. Every unanswered question. Every theory. Every dead end. All of it will be re-examined through the lens of truth. Until then, the story remains open. Not concluded. Not resolved. Not complete. And perhaps that is the most honest way to describe it. A story interrupted. A story waiting. A story still searching for its final chapter. For Lindsay Buziak, the world stopped on February 2, 2008. But for everyone left behind, the search did not stop. It continues through memory, through investigation, through persistence, through hope that refuses to fade entirely. And somewhere within that ongoing search lies the possibility that one day, the silence surrounding this case will finally break. Not with speculation, not with theory, but with truth. Until that day arrives, the story of Lindsay Busiak remains what it has been for years. A reminder of vulnerability. A reminder of unanswered questions. And a reminder that even in the absence of justice, the pursuit of truth does not end. It simply waits, patiently, for the moment when it can finally be heard.